So you always hear about this period of isolation that most successful people, or really most people in general, have to go through at some point in your life. Now, as humans, there's a couple things that we really don't like, right? The first one being boredom. We hate being bored, really. Like you can just, the whole period of instant gratification and scrolling and quick dopamine hits kind of outlines that we really don't like being bored. So we'll find any way to kind of get around it. And we don't like being alone, right? Even if you're somebody that claims to be an introvert and you don't like being around people, you still don't like being alone for the majority of people. You end up trying to find it through other means, whether that be watching videos of people who help you not feel alone, having something on in the background. Even when you go to sleep, you might like to have noise on. We don't like being alone, and for good reason. We're social creatures. We're not meant to be alone. That's why so many people exist around. But there is this period. I don't know why I said it like that, but there is this period of time that you have to go through at some point that ends up changing the trajectory of where you're that ends up changing the trajectory of where you're gonna go. Now, the reason the title says most people want to skip it is because it's not an easy period. A lot of times this period is associated with a lifestyle change or a change in mindset, meaning we all have to start at some point. We all have to start at some place. Now, if you know that your goal or your dream is to be somewhere else, a lot of times, even though you are that person, you haven't got to that point yet to where you're this person that has done it. And so that requires a change. If you grew up in a certain environment or in a certain area or around certain people your whole life, just by association with them or association in this place, these people have contributed to who you are and who you have become and the way that you think. So a lot of times this period of isolation is associated with some type of change. And the reason you have to be isolated is because if you're around people constantly who are to your detriment and who are making you think a certain type of way, keeping you trapped in a certain mindset, keeping you trapped in certain habits, you have to distance yourself from them. And if those are the only people that you have around you, that means that you have to be alone while you reconstruct yourself and while you start building new habits. If you have a habit of smoking and you're trying to quit smoking and it's kind of got you on a hold, right? Like it does a lot of people. And you're constantly around people who smoke all day, who smoke chronically, and you're trying to quit, meaning every time you show up, they're like, hey, bro, they try to pass you something and you're like, oh no, I'm not smoking no more. That might work for a couple of times, but eventually you're going to smoke. And I'm sure a lot of you have experienced that. And it goes with any type of habits. If you say, yeah, I'm off sweets for the whole year, but you're around people who eat sweets all day, eventually you're going to be like, let me get one. Let me get some of that. And that's just kind of, it's not your fault, but it's one of the factors of change is you do have to disassociate yourself with people who aren't contributing to that change or who are going to keep you in that same area and same mindset. The second reason you have to go through this period is because with that change, you have to give your mind time to reflect on the person that you want to become. You have to give your mind time to start making new pathways and start becoming this new person. And so, and we'll get to the third one in a minute, which will kind of be the one that hits at home park, but you have to give your mind time. You have to give your mind some quiet place to start reconstructing who you are, even though I just said it. Like I said, I don't think I said this, but quick disclaimer, these videos are not scripted. This is really just like a conversation. So if you have anything to chime in, just put that in the comments. But I'm pretty sure you could tell at this point that these aren't scripted. Anyways, back to it. You want to give your mind some time to reconstruct, and you have to disassociate yourself from these types of people, the people around you in the environment. That might look like moving to another city. You might be like, okay, I'm going to become a high level producer in content or in music or in something. And I always use creative and media examples because I actively work in the creative industry. I have an artist development company and I also work in media production. So that's why I always tend to lean towards these examples and these situations. But this really does apply for anything though. With that being said, let's say that you're living in a small town in Idaho, and there's nothing wrong with Idaho, but it just makes me think of potatoes. Nothing against Idaho. I know it's a wonderful place and there's nothing wrong with being from there. But let's say you live in a small town from Idaho You make beats every day and you're like, okay, I'm going to become a high level producer. But the people around you are trapping you in a mindset that's really not allowing you to break free from it and start contributing to that direction of your life. So you say, okay, I'm going to move to LA. LA is a crazy example. I'm going to move to Nashville because I know that's where a lot of music is at, and I know that I could be set up for success there. Whenever you initially leave and you get to Nashville, you're probably going to have no friends, no associates, no business partners, no anything, no clients even. And so this will be a period of being alone. But that period of being alone is what's going to determine what happens next. What do you do when you're alone? Some people fold because being alone is just too much. But some people thrive, though. They start to change. They start to read different materials. They start to break certain habits and build new ones. And that's ultimately what you want to do in that alone time, in that period where you're starting to slowly and slowly plant the roots. That is when that's, let me say it like this. This is really the most important part when you're trying to build something. Because whenever you're alone and whenever nobody's watching and whenever you have nothing kind of going for you at that time, this is when you start to build the foundation for what's to become. And if you build a weak foundation, eventually it's just going to collapse. This is when you're starting to build the roots. This is when you're starting to really build the roots. When the seed is planted, and you're alone and there's nothing to show for it. There's nothing around. It's just an empty field, but a seed has been planted though. That seed will start to grow down first. Its roots will start to grow out and then eventually it'll sprout. Now, the more time that you invest, the more that you're down when no one's watching and roots start getting deeper and deeper and deeper. They end up getting stronger. And eventually underground, there is a whole intricate system of roots that flow everywhere and all do different. I don't want to say they do different things, but there's a flow. There's a system of roots all built underneath that could span miles. And on the top, you might just see a tree. But the foundation is so strong that this tree tipping over just probably isn't going to happen unless you have somebody come chop the tree down. But let's say that nobody chops the tree down. So when you're alone, you're building the system of roots. You're building the foundation of what is to become, what is to build. You're allowing yourself to change. This is a crucial and extremely important part of achieving something. So why is it that most people want to skip this phase? Why is it that most people don't want to go through this? Why is it that people want to change but don't want to take the initiative or go through this? And it really is kind of small, this small section of life that will allow them. It's kind of like a transitional period. Why does nobody want to go through this tunnel? Well, like we said in the beginning, humans are social creatures and we don't like being alone, right? Especially if you know that you have to kind of distance yourself from some people that you grew up with or lived your whole life with or have a strong connection with, but you know they're not good for the idea of success that you have. It becomes a hard thing to do. And then habits on top of it becomes an even harder thing to do. If you know that to achieve something, you need to build the habit of never blaming anything else but yourself when it comes to what you're doing. Meaning you're always in the idea of, oh, this happened and I could have done something better to prevent it. But if you grew up having a victim mentality or victim mindset or around people who are like that and you've gotten used to that, it becomes a little bit harder to take on that trait. And that's where that transitional period comes into. So why is it that people want to skip this process? Why do people want to skip this? And it is really kind of short, the transitional period to start building what they want to build. Why is it that people want to skip it? Why does nobody want to go through it? Well, as we said in the beginning, people do not like to be alone. I don't like to be alone. It can sometimes allow you to take like a nihilistic point of view on things, and it can really kind of make you go downhill if you don't posture yourself correctly while you're going through this period. But people don't like to be alone. And sometimes it's hard to leave behind people that you grew up with, even if you know that they're keeping you stuck in a certain way of thinking with certain habits. And you know you have to distance yourself if you want to achieve what it is you want to achieve. It can be hard sometimes, but that's not the biggest reason that people want to skip it. The biggest reason that people want to skip this foundation right here is because whenever you're alone, it requires you to start relying on yourself. It requires you to start relying on your mind. It allows you to be alone with your mind, and it allows you to reflect on who it is you really are. Now, it might seem kind of crazy to some people to never have to never have any sort of self-awareness or self-reflection, but this is really the killer. This is really what happens during this period is you end up reflecting on yourself, who you are, what you've done, and what it is you want to do. And that can be scary for most people or a lot of people. It can be scary to be alone, and now you're just alone with nothing but yourself, nothing but your thoughts. But this is where the real change comes in. This is when you really start to dissect who it is that you are, and you start to realize the flaws, and you start to realize what it is you need to improve in order to reach wherever you want to reach. And so that's the biggest reason that people skip it, is because they don't want to be alone with themselves. They don't want to reflect on who they are. They don't want to dissect and really have to be accountable for who they've become. And that's been this video.